welcome to today's program. We're just going to give people a few moments to filter in, and then we'll dive into our discussion of optimizing your sales and marketing through HubSpot effectiveness and strategy. All right, for those of you just joining us, we're going to take about 30 more seconds just to let people filter in. If you want to grab a last cup of coffee before we get started, take a moment and do so now, and then we'll go ahead and begin today's program. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, hi, Terry. How are you? Good to see you, my friend.
Doug, how are you? Nice to be here. Thank you.
All right. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's web event. Today's program is on the topic of optimizing your sales and marketing effectiveness through a focus on HubSpot strategy. And we're going to talk about the role of strategy and the role of technology and how to connect those two together. So, my name is Doug Wendt. I'm the president and CEO of Wendt Partners. We are a New York City-based HubSpot Elite Solutions partner. So basically what that means is we do a lot of work with a lot of companies to implement and optimize their business efforts, their business growth efforts, using the power of the HubSpot platform. And I'm excited about today's discussion because we're going to talk about both of those things, HubSpot, but also the strategy behind developing effective business growth efforts, particularly with a focus on the B2B marketplace. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We do adhere to a strict schedule, so we will end this program at 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Savings Time on the dot, not a moment later. In addition, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A button or box at the bottom of your screen. So this is a Zoom webinar. Down at the bottom, in about the center of the screen, you'll see an icon for Q&A. You can type your question there. If we have a moment to answer it on the fly, we will. Otherwise, we'll make sure to answer it at some point during the program. So we encourage your interaction and your questions and ideas as we go. So with that in mind, excuse me, and a little bit of clearing my throat, I'd like to welcome you all to today's program. And last note, if any of your colleagues were unable to join us today, don't worry, we will send out a recording to you. And within approximately a week, we will also publish this on YouTube. So you'll have both public and private access to the recording as well. So with those do's and don'ts and housekeeping items out of the way, I'm really excited to welcome Terry Sullivan. Hello again, Terry. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here, Doug.
So first and foremost, while I'm sitting here on the East Coast, Terry is squarely in the middle of the United States. He is our St. Louis flag bearer. So, and Terry, you've been a what do you call, I should know this, but I don't. Do you say St. Louisian? Like, what do you say? What do you call a person from St. Louis?
St. Louisan, whatever. St. Louisan's usually what
St.
we go by.
Louisan. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
This New Yorker had no idea. That just tells you how completely myopic New Yorkers are. Nobody here is surprised by that. Well, thank you for joining us, our St. Louisian, Terry Sullivan. The reason Terry's here, among the many reasons, one is just because he's a great person to chat with, and I knew we'd have a wonderful time. Terry oversees one of our practice groups at Wendt Partners. And telling the story of how we developed that practice group will really set the stage for today's conversation. So Terry's role at Wendt Partners is he works with our clients who are looking to optimize or rethink and re-engineer their marketing strategies, but with an understanding that they will be deploying those new strategies or those reconsidered strategies in the HubSpot platform. So his title is our HubSpot Marketing Effectiveness Lead, and he operates in conjunction with members of our team who focus on implementing and optimizing the actual technology. So before we dig into a little bit more about that, Terry, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll talk a little bit about your journey to HubSpot as well.
Sure. Well, I've been primarily in the marketing end of things for, I hate to admit it, 30 plus years, but that has certainly involved sales and management as well. I have worked for a number of small, medium, and large companies. I've spent a lot of time consulting, largely with smaller businesses. The majority of my career has been in B2B.
Mhm.
So, I think when my journey into MarTech or marketing technology, probably back in the mid 2000s, is sort of how I eventually came to HubSpot, which we can talk about in a minute. But so I look at things a lot from a business owner standpoint. I've been
Mm,
part of many startups. I've had a few businesses myself. So that's sort of the framework or the lens with which I see things is, from an ownership standpoint and a
yes.
stakeholder standpoint.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so that's kind of the short version. And then I do teaching at the university level here in St. Louis,
I was going to
and
say you're also a professor.
professor, and I've written a couple textbooks. So I try to keep pretty busy, and I just love all this stuff. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you. And I'm curious, do you talk about HubSpot in your teaching, or are you focused more on marketing concepts? I've always wondered because I've debated, I've also been a professor. I'm not currently one, but I was for many years. And
Mhm.
I've always debated how much to try to bring current technology into the discussion
Yeah.
with students. I'm just curious what your experience has been.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I would try to bring it in quite often. In many cases, we would do, either HubSpot certifications or at least use, concepts for, different assignments. But almost always, if it remotely applies, I'll at least have them get some kind of HubSpot certification, inbound or, social media or what have you.
Absolutely.
And so many of them have commented, once they've gotten out into the workplace or, with a internship, how many employers have said, oh my gosh, this is so great that you're familiar with HubSpot. So
Yes. So that really brings it to a practical level, doesn't it? That they can
it
say, I've actually worked with the technology that puts, that you're going to be deploying
yeah.
or similar to.
Well,
Excellent.
and just as sort of a construct for what we're going to talk about today,
Hmm.
what I often try to tell students, and the same really kind of goes with clients. I mean, it's really about the big picture first
Right.
and kind of understanding strategically what is it that you're trying to achieve, and then figuring out how the technology supports that. Technology being
Mm,
the enabler, not necessarily the stake, if you will. I mean, it can be, but
yes.
what you want to do with it and how you want to cook it and all that stuff, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I'm getting really hungry because, ironically, of course, I always skip lunch on web event days since we do them at lunchtime. That's great. And Terry, we're going to come back to some of those metaphors because we were talking about this before we
Sure.
came on the live program. So perfect. I have a question for you then. Let's go back. Tell us a little bit about how did you stumble upon HubSpot? I mean, like you said, Martech, I mean, I remember when I first encountered, marketing technology was the thing that Ford Motor Company or Hilton Hotels could afford back when,
Mhm.
Eloqua was the product I had heard of, and then Pardot
Yeah.
came along, and and those products were in extremely high price points. And the
Yep.
rest of the world was like, well, I guess I'll send a few emails and then social media, maybe I'll do a Facebook post. Like that was it.
Yeah.
Everybody outside of the Fortune 100 ended up sort of with crumbs on the table.
Yep.
How did you end up encountering HubSpot? And then what led you to decide that, at least for a lot of clients and situations, maybe not all, but certainly a significant number, HubSpot really does stand apart as the right MarTech platform?
Yep. Well, back in probably the mid 2000s, I was actually transitioning from a senior marketing manager role at a company to running sales and marketing for a smaller company. And so we were cobbling together, various technologies, a CRM. Then we're, saying, okay, what are we using for our email marketing? And I think we stumbled upon Infusionsoft first.
Mhm. Yep.
So spent several years using that platform and used it for many clients after I exited that role. And then probably in 2000, maybe 11 or 12,
Mhm.
we brought HubSpot into another company that I was managing the marketing and sales team at that company. We had Salesforce, and so we integrated HubSpot and Salesforce.
Yep.
But it was also a keen reminder of, okay, now that we have this technology, which at the time was like, wow, okay, this is really amazing. But HubSpot really seemed to be at the forefront of a platform that made a lot of sense from a business standpoint, but also being
Yes.
able to execute efficiently on your own within an internal team. So that's kind of how I ended up there.
And I'm going to pull two themes out of what you just shared that I think are really important to just emphasize. One is that you can assemble all the best technology in the world, but getting that mishmash of tools to work can be a nightmare.
Yeah, no
I
doubt.
myself been a very similar journey. We actually used to use Salesforce and HubSpot, and then before that, 20 other tools. Totally agree with you there. And I think it's important for people to understand, because we're going to talk a little bit about what is HubSpot too for our audience, that something I've been in the software industry, I've been in the enterprise software industry for 25 plus years. I don't want to understate that. Oh my gosh. And one thing that I've seen over and over and over again is that the easiest way for these companies to grow is to acquire somebody else's stuff,
Yep.
spend as little money as possible integrating it into the stack. Okay, and throwing a label on it with the same logo. So I've watched this, show play so many times. And the joke, and it's not really a joke, it's a fact. Like when we bring a client over from Salesforce, they typically have to cancel 3 contracts because it's not one product from one company. It's actually 3 different products.
Yeah. Right.
Even
Right.
today, those
Yep.
companies, they're never going to spend the money to really weave them together. And
Yeah.
so there are a lot of people talking about integrating sales, marketing, service, all those components of customer experience. But honestly, nobody's bothering to do it because it's
Mm-hmm.
expensive to do it. And so where this comes from, the discussion about HubSpot is HubSpot's the one company that's actually done it. As you know, HubSpot only builds on their core platform. So
Right.
if they want to add a technology, they add that technology to the core platform. They don't just acquire someone's stuff, slap a label on it and sell it as their own. And that gets to the second priority, which is for everybody here, if you can't practically make it work, it doesn't matter if it's possible. I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday about the Hyperloop and the fact that, Virgin Companies was going to do a Hyperloop. And of course, Elon Musk was going to do a Hyperloop. And the trouble with Hyperloops is it's technically possible, but practically unrealistic and impossible to make work. And
Yeah.
it's a classic example. We can talk whiteboards all we want. If we can't take that small team, right, or even a large team, we've had 100 million, $200 million a year companies who've
Mhm.
said the technology we're using, it takes us a week and a half to get one marketing campaign off the ground because it's so cumbersome because we're moving between 3 different products.
Yeah. Well,
So
it's funny too that you would say that because I can think back of a couple instances where I was working for a large company at the time. In this particular business, large company, many disparate data systems. So, the goal was always integration, right? We're going to get
right.
all of these integrated. We're going to get the CRM talking to blah, blah, blah. And this is, pre-HubSpot.
Yep.
But this company alone scrapped a couple of multi-million-dollar CRM implementations and integrations because, what seemed theoretically possible and even probable turned out to be a practical nightmare.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
I can totally relate to that.
And I'm gonna add something to that as we start talking about what is HubSpot for our audience, which is oftentimes we've had clients now. So just everybody think about this for a second. We've had clients who bought HubSpot because sales, marketing, and service would be on the same page, right? In one database, one platform. But that's not the culture change. What we found is oftentimes no one has thought about the fact that marketing, sales, and service may not want to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And we can talk until we're blue in the face unless there's a strategic commitment at the executive level to everyone in the company operating from one playbook. All you've done is move everyone's little islands into one database, which is in a weird way, it's almost worse because we've seen them overwrite each other or create field proliferation. So marketing says we want to look at company sizes in these brackets, and sales says what's important to us is these brackets. And then they've created competing fields to track the size of the company. That's a real world example, by the way. So If you're going to move down the road of unifying your customer experience journey in order to drive more growth, more revenue, more sales, that's why we're here. You have to think about the strategy first. And that's what we're going to dig into in just a few moments. And that's, Terry, what you do. And so we're so excited to focus on that. With that in mind, let's take a short look at what is HubSpot, just so everyone who's joined us today is kind of up to speed. And Terry, I'm just going to walk through some very basic elements here.
Sure.
Feel free
Sure.
to chime in. So
Okay.
HubSpot is, as we've been saying, a single piece of software. I just can't emphasize that enough. It seems obvious, but in this industry, it's anything but. It's a single piece of software that is organized into what we call a collection of hubs. Okay. And those hubs basically add functionality to the platform. And I'm going to show this in a minute in our own HubSpot account. So your marketing department will run in HubSpot. Your sales CRM will be in HubSpot. Your service and help desk platform will be in HubSpot. Those are the three primary customer facing hubs. Then we have three additional hubs that enable that journey to advance. One is CMS Hub or Content Hub. You can actually run websites and web applications on HubSpot. That's what CMS Hub does. Operations Hub, which goes back to Terry's earlier point, where we're connecting HubSpot to other platforms, and we want to make sure the data flows the right way and things work in the right manner. And last but not least, Commerce Hub, which adds e-commerce and quote to cash capabilities inside the platform. So if you think about this, what we're trying to do is eliminate some of these gaps that Terry has described already. But as we talked about, that requires unifying the strategy and unifying the team. I'm going to take just a few moments and give a two-penny tour of what HubSpot actually looks like, just for everyone's familiarization. And then we're going to talk about the elements of the B2B growth stack and what it actually takes to make marketing in particular successful in the HubSpot environment. And one of the reasons I think people struggle to talk about these things is because when they've worked with other products, those products are not integrated and those products tend to be very difficult to use. And so as a result, they're not used to actually having the next level discussion about how do we create a unified strategy. If you're still fighting your technology, trying to get an e-newsletter out, you're never going to get around to the discussion of creating a unified strategy. That's something you can get to when you've eliminated those very basic roadblocks. So the irony is that's what HubSpot allows you to do. So we're actually inside When Partners HubSpot account, and I'm just showing a particular screen. And when I say HubSpot is one product, like don't be confused. Those hubs are just terms that we use to describe specific functionality. Basically, it's because, not everybody's ready to use all the tools in the platform. And so we don't want you to have to pay for tools you're not going to use. So it's more of a strategy for how you can buy and implement the software, but there's no technical line between these things. At its core, HubSpot provides all the capabilities of an enterprise CRM. And as a result, when I look at a contact record, and I'll just pull myself up if I can even spell my last name. Ironically, I lose the proper spelling of my own. Like suddenly I can't type accurately. Whenever I'm doing a web event, I type all day, but then I lose it when I come into web events. It's like writing on a whiteboard. Suddenly you can't remember how to spell something, even though you've typed it 1,000 times because it feels different on a whiteboard. So this is my contact record in HubSpot. And the important thing here is that this is all one record. So if Terry works with a client to implement a marketing strategy to, for example, here, I'll show you some of the things that you can see in here to, for example, send digital ads out or send LinkedIn sponsored posts or WhatsApp messages or marketing emails or bring people to the website, social media, any of those things. If Doug Wendt interacts with those things, if Doug Wendt engages with those things, if we send those things to Doug, any of those activities will show up here automatically. And it's not like this then has to go sync with the sales department contact record. This is the contact record, period, for all users of HubSpot, regardless of department. And that unifying theme is true across the entire platform. That's really the magic here, is it is one platform. I keep hammering it on it because people just forget about it. They're so used to working in their silos. Okay. Yep. The technology silo, thanks to the hard work of the folks at HubSpot, has been eliminated. Now we have to address the strategy and culture silo. And so to kind of set the stage, I'll tell a story. And then Terry, if you want to talk about one of the clients you're working with, and we'll go
Sure.
from there. 18 months ago, we had a client. They purchased HubSpot's marketing enterprise product, which is the premier, it's the first class seat on the airplane. It's the most expensive edition. Um, and this is a pretty robust company. It's a multi-$100 million a year company. But like many B2B companies, a marketing department of three. Okay. Because it's not B2C where it's all marketer driven, right? I've seen $100 million B2C companies with a 50-person marketing department and $100 million B2B companies with a 5-person marketing department. Just gives you an idea of the difference in mindset there. So 3-person marketing department purchased Marketing Hub Enterprise for their company. It's in the AEC industry, architecture, engineering, construction. They purchased the software. We implemented the software. In their case, their company was standardized on Salesforce, and they weren't ready to make that transition. So we connected HubSpot to Salesforce. Um, and then they said, we're really struggling with kind of what to do now. You've implemented us. We get all that. I think we need more training on how to use some of the more advanced features in Marketing Hub Enterprise. So we delivered more training. Halfway through the training, the client stopped our team and said, you know what? That's actually not the problem. We need you to tell us what to do in Marketing Hub.
Mhm.
And our team said, well, what to do? Like, that's your marketing strategy. Like, hopefully, you know your marketing strategy. And the client said, with all due respect, we're looking for your advice on a new marketing strategy, right?
Right.
And so the light bulb went off. And the light bulb that went off was, you can buy the Ferrari, right? Which a lot of people say HubSpot is, but that doesn't mean you're ready to drive a Ferrari. And that's no knock on anybody. I mean, I can't drive
Sure.
a Ferrari. Okay. If you want to see what it's like to put someone like me behind the wheel of a Ferrari, just look up, Ferrari fail videos and watch hundreds of people drive supercars into ditches and trees because they have no idea what they're doing. And the challenge is that's what this is like. So all the training that we do is how to do the thing that you're already planning to do in HubSpot,
Right.
how to do the email marketing in HubSpot. But it doesn't answer the question of what kind of strategy should we apply to that email marketing. So that light bulb went off, and that's when it went partners. We decided to be the first HubSpot partner to build what we call HubSpot Effectiveness Consulting. And so to bring it all the way back to Terry for our audience, Terry leads our marketing effectiveness consulting group. We also have other team members who focus on sales and who focus on service. These are senior executives who are also conversant with HubSpot, believe in the technology and the product, and want to bridge that gap. They want to help the client develop the right strategy for the company and then implement it on HubSpot. So, with that in mind, Terry, share with a little bit about. I know you've been working on some projects that fall right into side to that picture.
Well, I was talking about this last night with my wife, and we talk about data and the use of data and, all of these things all the time. She runs a customer support team for a company here in St. Louis, HubSpot, by the way. But historically, what I'll try to do is, because everybody wants to put the shiny object first. They want the technology to be front and center. They're so excited because they bought it, or maybe they bought it and now they're not, utilizing it very much. And it goes back to having the discussion at the business level first. And your point about silos is really poignant to me because I've been in so many consulting engagements where what has ended up being sort of the result of the engagement is to find out that so many people within a company are working in silos. There's zero alignment really. And so all the departments are technically, working on their own. They're almost in many ways working against each other or creating friction.
Yes,
And the whole point of, you showed the record of the CRM, right? That record is supposed to be available to everyone in the company. That's the whole point,
that's right.
right? And so, if you just back up on the technology and say, okay, look, what are you trying to achieve from a business objective? What are the goals and objectives? But then what does each department or the people within the department need to do to make their lives easier, to make the company, objectives more attainable, make customers happier, et cetera.
Yes,
And so what I try to do is facilitate discussions to see what those things are, and actually document those and have some agreement and alignment, then really work on this is how we're going to use HubSpot to support those things. And a lot of times that's really lost. And you mentioned it earlier, and I can't tell you how many clients I've run into over the years where they're like, we have this professional or enterprise level of HubSpot. We're doing email marketing. We may have thrown up a landing page. That's about it.
Yeah.
And so,
and we didn't do social media because we're not sure it's really important.
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny because they feel compelled to sort of circle back around because now they've made the investment. Now they're paying the money. And so it's like, oh my gosh, this thing's just sitting here. We have the Ferrari parked in the garage that we're never driving.
Right.
But, my proposition is to say, look, even if you can, before you get to that point, before you even turn it on, or maybe even before you make the purchase, have the discussions of the stakeholders that need to be involved. And quite often, as you probably have run into too, Doug, a lot of times the quote unquote higher ups are not in those discussions because they're like, oh, well, that's technology. Well, not really.
Right. It's really enterprise strategy. Right.
Exactly.
So yeah, and the scenario you described, I just want to just call that one thing out. Like the thing that terrifies me the most is a B2B company who is coming from a MailChimp. They're coming from a Constant Contact. Okay. Yep. They come to HubSpot and they just replicate their MailChimp or Constant Contact life.
See it all the time.
And then, a year later, the CFO is going to say, why are we spending probably north of $1,000 a month, typically, not always, but usually, sometimes multiple thousands a month on this tool if all we're going to do is MailChimpize it? In your experience, what are some of the things that you focused on to get clients past that roadblock? Where do you feel, you're able to kind of get the breakthrough that, we need to stop thinking of this as an overpriced email machine and start focusing on an integrated strategy for executing a surround bound, or however you want to call it, marketing effort?
Sure. Well, we have a client right now, and, part of the engagement for me is to come back to them with a strategy of how to really leverage and utilize as much of HubSpot as possible to support what they are trying to do. But they started off with email, as so many people do, which is fine. Sometimes it's a great way to kind of dip your toe in the water. But I had remarked to my contacts to say, look, I'd like to do some interviews with various people in various functions. And even though in this particular instance, marketing is the one driving the use of HubSpot because they do have Salesforce, we've integrated it, that is already there.
Right.
But when I said, look, I want to talk to some people on the sales team, right away, there's kind of like, well, wait a minute, sales doesn't really have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
And that's no shade to them whatsoever.
No.
That sales and marketing integration and in alignment. Alignment is kind of the key word that I always come back to.
Yes.
It's like,
yes,
we want to make sure that people are on the same page about, okay, if we're going to be using HubSpot marketing to generate leads, great. What are we going to, how do the leads flow? At what point do they go over to sales? What is the follow-up process? Customer retention. We have this whole bank of customers. What are we doing and how can we use HubSpot to actually stay in touch with them in a more automated way or a more insightful way? Yes. So I'm doing the interviews now, and so that entails time talking to individual people. But you could say, well, gosh, let's just have 1 or 2 strategy sessions with 10 or 20 people at the table. Probably not the best thing. Not going to go well.
Sure. It's like the Hyperloop. It's physically possible, but practically inadvisable.
Exactly. And people are much more unencumbered to tell you things one-on-one of what their pain points are or what their observations are, where the holes are. And then if you can bring those, insights into a cohesive whole and have people understand, look, you're not ratting out, Joan from sales over there, but you're saying,
Right.
look, this is the feedback that we've collected, and here's why we're presenting the strategy that we are, because it's based on the collective feedback that you gave us. So that's generally my approach.
You've hit on something that I'm really going to challenge our audience with, and that I'd love to explore a little deeper. We talk about the three customer facing functions that are the core of the HubSpot model, right? Marketing, sales, and service. What's interesting to me is that, and I'm a former marketer. I mean, I'm still a marketer, but I mean, I used to do the marketing every day, right? For years, I was a marketing director, et cetera. Then I moved into sales, and now, of course, I'm doing both. And the thing that strikes me is that marketing professionals have both the greatest opportunity and the greatest imperative to reach out, even if it's uncomfortable, and connect with sales and connect with service and drive the conversation forward. They
Yeah.
are in the pole position, but they're so used to being ignored or, not listened to, is the nicer way to say it, for years, that a lot of marketers are like, I'm just going to do my thing, keep my head down and produce some leads, keep my fingers crossed it all works out. And that doesn't work in the long term anymore for a couple of reasons. Number one, senior leadership's definition of marketing's success or failure changes constantly.
Yeah.
Changes constantly. Second of all, if you're not actively involved in discussions with sales and service, they're just going to decide that whatever you're doing isn't relevant. We did a project a good number of years ago now with a company in DC, a technology company. And, marketing was producing marketing qualified leads, and sales was just ignoring them and saying they were useless. Very common, because the company was sales driven. 98% of their revenue was coming from leads that were generated by the sales department, not by marketing.
Sure.
And so marketing was trying to add value and show value. And when we really did a deep dive, we learned two things. Number one, a significant portion of those not very useful leads actually later became buyers after a sales outreach, and were much more likely to be a buyer because they'd first been nurtured by marketing, even though marketing was getting zero credit.
Yep.
So marketing was generating these leads. They were sort of sitting in the warming bin and being ignored. And then a year later, when they get a cold outreach that's not really cold, that's the thing. Sales thought they were cold outreaches, but they weren't. These people had already been nurtured and engaged by marketing. And so then, jackpot. And when we finally concatenated the data, we're like, you understand, marketing has been over here totally contributing to your bottom line success for years, and you had no idea. And in fact, marketing had no idea. The marketing people were like, we had no idea we were that successful. We thought we were a total failure, by everybody else's definition, right? And then the second thing is, what is the number one thing I always hear people saying when they talk about what marketing should do, including marketers? We need to segment. We need to customize. We need to configure content so that if you are in Idaho and you're interested in ball bearings, even though we sell ball bearings and truck axles, and you've been on these blog articles that show that you're particularly interested in ball bearings and use in a certain application, that's the content that you get, right? In order to have that level of segmentation precision, guess who you have to talk to? You got to talk to sales, got to talk to service, because they're collecting the data that you need.
Well, what you just hit on, sorry if I don't mean to
go for it. No, I was done. Perfect. Go.
We talk about, the stool concept quite a bit, which is, the triumvirate of sales, marketing, and customer support or service.
Right.
And it's so funny that, even in today's, quote unquote, modern thinking age, we view these functions so separately from silos. And then,
Yes.
this is often from upper management. And those three need to work like this.
Yes.
And, if you go on the front lines and you go, who has more insights than anybody? Sorry, it's customer support typically.
That's
even
correct.
Though marketing's doing all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. But the beauty of the HubSpot platform, which I was really happy when they came out with, because I started when it was just marketing, but then they came out with sales and service and, all the other hubs.
Absolutely.
They have the right infrastructure to support that type of thinking and that type of implementation at the organization level.
Absolutely.
So I thought that was a very good point.
So to some extent, what we're doing here is really trying to encourage marketers to become customer experience leaders,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
might be leading from the middle, but they need to embrace that picture. And I'll give just one technological example of where this gets very, very real. So increasingly now, by unifying sales and marketing technologically, we're able to actually have marketing nurture someone to the point where they book a discovery call with a salesperson. Okay. Or an introductory call, like actually get an appointment on the calendar. And that's possible in HubSpot because sales and marketing integration isn't a thing. It just is. Right. And so you can nurture someone, and when they reach a certain point, you can then ask them through automation, would you like to explore that question further with a member of our team? They say yes, they book on the calendar, it goes in the calendar of the appropriate salesperson. And so I'm saying to marketers, look, you're already a part of the sales department.
Yeah.
Okay. You may not be paid from the sales department budget, but let's be clear, you're already a leader in that department. You
Mhm.
might as well go ahead and take those reins and run with it.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's back up now and talk about, the thing we were focusing on a little bit earlier, which is the typical scenario of we just bought a Ferrari and we send an e-newsletter every once in a while. And by the way, I want to clarify, there's nothing wrong with sending e-newsletters.
Sure.
We send them every month like clockwork, and it's
Yeah.
been a critical tool in our arsenal. It's just not the only tool.
Yep.
In your experience working with B2B companies in particular, Terry, how do you get them to then start looking at other tactics and methodologies, and then how do you bring it together and integrate it?
It's great. Well, I mean, a lot of the times, especially if they've already purchased the Ferrari and it's sitting in the garage, we do what I would call sort of a utilization audit and say, okay, what's being used now? To what extent? Are they doing maybe some email campaigns or promotions? Are they sending people to a landing page? Are they sort of
Right.
observing some of the best practices around that? Are they
Yes.
segmenting their audience? Are they doing these things? And what you just brought up too, which kind of gets me thinking. HubSpot is known for being able to automate emails and in texts, right? As a trigger, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Doug went to our pricing page. He's already in our database, so we can automate a message to go to him and say, hey, would you like to speak to a rep or what have you? But we've done a couple things in the past where we integrated with Postalytics, which is a
Mm.
direct mail integration where you can trigger a direct mail piece that can be personalized to go out to a prospect or a customer. And
Yes.
the reason I bring that up is simply because in many cases, direct mail is effective and new again, especially like in B2B. And it's just thinking that HubSpot isn't just email, it is numerous other things that can connect with HubSpot so that you can do different types of outreach or different types of processes or what have you. Yeah, this is Postalytics.
Yep.
And I've
And they
worked with
have a
these guys forever and they have a great product.
and it's a HubSpot certified integration. So that's
Yeah,
spectacular.
it is seamless. But that's just an example. So, to really answer your question, Doug, so what I do is, we try to look at what are they using now? How can we help them utilize more of HubSpot to achieve what it is that they're trying to achieve?
Mm.
And I don't want to call it simple, but it's sort of that simple.
Yeah, and I'm gonna key into two things that you mentioned there. One is that we tend to think of, since HubSpot is a digital application, right? It sits on the internet. We tend to think of it as only being useful for digital marketing, and that's not
Yeah,
true.
right.
It
Yeah.
is just as useful for physical marketing.
Mhm.
I love the example of the Postalytics integration. We used to use a different service. In fact, I need to talk to you about activating Postalytics. Um, Pre-COVID, a lot of this, we're still coming back to for pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, my process flow, because I used to do all of our selling face to face, was that after a face to face meeting, I would come back, use a template in HubSpot to set up the thank you note, hit a button, and it would be automatically sent to a thank you note service that would prep
Mhm.
and send the note on our pre-approved and designed stationery. Okay,
Right, right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Postalytics takes that and makes it possible at scale.
Yep.
Okay. A lot of B2B companies are rediscovering the importance of in-person events, trade shows, conferences, lunch and learns. seminars, workshops, technical meetings, all of those user groups, all those are important. People are craving in person. The events function in HubSpot allows you to track and manage all that, but only if you think about how to do it well,
That's right.
and you plan your architecture and you plan your strategy to support that. So I'm so glad you brought up the Postalytics example, because I find a lot of marketing teams are operating in this schizophrenia where there's like, Jamie, he's really good with the digital stuff. We'll have him do all that. And then Jeanette over here is like our trade show guru.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
of course, I get that. Look, if anyone's ever tried to plan a trade show, let's say at Chicago in the McCormick Place, it takes
Yep.
an army to get that right.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, I get to admit that I was the guy back in the 90s who didn't understand union regulations and got fined for building our booth without union permission. Okay. So
Yep.
been there, done that, got it
Yeah.
all. Okay. So yeah, we probably do need, Jamie over here being our trade show guru. But whatever Jamie's doing, it darn well better connect with whatever Jeanette's doing, or this is just a big waste of time.
Mhm.
We need this to be integrated, and we can set up the technology, but if we don't change the culture and the process and the strategy, it's not going to happen.
Well, and the culture and the process, I think, are the keys. And so, like, I mentioned my wife, we talk about data all the time. So a lot of companies, they have either, HubSpot as the platform, or maybe they have disparate systems that are somehow talking to each other. And so
Yes.
everybody, has been enticed by this idea of big data, and we have all this data to make data-driven decisions.
Right.
But if you don't know how you want to use the data or what you're hoping to get from the data can actually probably, hobble you more than it can help you, because
Oh,
then all of a sudden you're just drowning in the data, and it's becoming a source of confusion as opposed to a source of clarification. So I think that's part of
absolutely.
the strategic outlook of, okay, the cart before the horse is, such a cliche, but it's such a true thing as it relates to this. You're often putting the cart before the horse, where if we would just step back and go, okay, what do we want this data to do for us? How do we want to use
Right.
it? We have the technology to take advantage of the data, but it's lassoing kind of the objectives and goals first.
Oh,
So
okay. So you just hit a third rail that I am very passionate about, because you nailed it. What I see all the time, again, I'm going to make a comparison. B2C, those companies are typically communicating with 50, 100,000, multiple hundreds of thousands of people. In B2B, even large companies are lucky to be communicating with 10, 20,000 people, right? In many cases. If I'm a medical device company, my target audience might be 50,000 people in all of North America, as an example.
right.
Okay. The problem that I see marketers fall into, and particularly in B2B, is they don't understand. And I understand why they don't understand. They don't understand because they've been sold something inaccurately. And I don't mean by HubSpot, I mean by the industry. And that is that all this data is relevant regardless of sample size.
Yeah.
Okay. And 99% of the sample sizes we encounter are too small to make any meaningful decisions about.
Yeah.
And so what I see all the time is clients get paralyzed. Well, should I send our e-newsletter on Tuesday at 2 or next Thursday at 4? And my answer is send the damn e-newsletter. I don't
Yeah.
care when you send it, because I've literally seen clients stop marketing because they're terrified of making the wrong decision. And they start reading the tea leaves. We'll do a nurture campaign, right? And they're like, well, I don't see a lot of people clicking through on the third email. Maybe we should cancel the campaign. That's not the point.
Yeah.
Okay. The point is to get the communication out and then let those people over time self nurture or follow up and ask them,
Right.
to find out what's going on. When you're dealing with small numbers of people, the most important thing, and small number, I mean like under 100,000 is a small number,
Right.
right? In marketing data, the most important thing is to do the thing. And so we're always trying to encourage marketers, do the thing. Don't worry about it. Do the thing. Do the event, do the webinar, do the workshop, send the e-newsletter, send the update, create the nurture campaign, nurture the people through. The data's not showing me what I want. That's short-term thinking.
Yep.
Long-term is like the example I gave earlier. Marketing thought they were having no impact because those weren't considered important leads by sales. A year later, that person is much more likely to buy because they were nurtured by marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And, it's funny because part of what a HubSpot, brings to the table is the ability for precision in targeted
Yes.
marketing. And that's the whole point, right? And so a lot of times what we see is, everybody wants to focus on the giant world, right? Whatever that universe is, whether it's B2B or B2C, here's the big universe. We want to hit all
Right.
these people. That's about the most ineffective way you can go, right? You want a piece of the pie, not the whole
Yes.
pie. And
Yes.
that's what this kind of technology allows you to do. But you have
Mm.
to also set it up that way to get to that place.
So, and this brings up something that I want to come back to, which is the unique approach that we all are taking, right? Like you are paired with a member of our HubSpot, what we call our platform solutions team. And that person's an expert in all the details of how to implement and technically configure and optimize HubSpot. That doesn't, and by their own admission, every single member of that team would agree, that doesn't make them a 25-year plus marketing strategy expert, right? Um, and we're trying to marry those two elements together so the client gets the best of both worlds. In what has been your experience of that unified approach, and where do you think the future of this goes? How do we help more companies harness the power of the technology without getting stuck in either ditch of strategy with no technology or technology with no strategy?
It's a really good question. It's a loaded question because, I think as much as we like the word strategy and strategic and all of those things, I think it connotes to some people that, you know what, we're not going to have another strategy meeting, planning
Right.
session, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And the
It
fact of the
spins
matter
a
is,
negative connotation
right,
in many
right,
cases.
right.
Yeah.
And strategy is simply just identifying what is it that you do or what you choose not to do, right? So if we
Yes.
can come up with the strategic framework in a simple way to just say, look, okay, we just spent all this money on HubSpot or we're about to purchase it. Let's sit down. Here's my audit with my recommendations. Now you're rounding first on the way to second.
Mm.
Whereas if you don't do it that way, you're still standing at home plate waiting for the pitch,
Yes.
but you already made the expenditure. And so I feel like strategy and execution, at least from a marketing standpoint, that's what we always talk about, right? You can have
Mm-hmm.
great strategy, but if you can't execute, who cares? If you don't have a strategy and you're just executing willy-nilly, which a lot of us do using disparate email tools, landing page
Right.
tools, this or that, they go hand in hand. And so that certainly applies to the use of technology in the way that we're talking about it with HubSpot. Did that answer your question? I don't know if it
Yeah.
did.
No, absolutely. And I want to point something out for our audience, which I think is also really relevant to this conversation. A lot of organizations come into a platform like HubSpot with preconceived notions of what is relevant to their use case.
Yeah.
And so I'll give a common example that I hear all the time. I hear, and particularly C-level executives, I love you all, but listen to me. They will say, LinkedIn is the only social media platform we should be on because
Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, that doesn't matter. LinkedIn is for business.
That's right.
And I will say, actually, and this is doubly ironic because the younger folks, the millennials and Gen Zs, are like, who is on Facebook? That's for old people. And my response is, who are we selling to? We're probably selling to people with gray hair. It doesn't matter whether they went on LinkedIn to read business stuff or they went on Facebook to look at pictures of their grandkids. They're there. No advertiser in television ever said, well, I don't want to be on TV because someone's watching Walter Cronkite and I want to talk about soap. They're there because their audience is watching Walter Cronkite. Their audience could be watching anything, the New York City Ballet. It
Exactly.
doesn't matter. They're there. And I can
Yeah.
tell you, I have actually, as a CEO, gained a terrifying amount of information, terrifying to me because I like to make decisions and try new things. I have discovered new products, new services. I have done more. I've done more business decision making thanks to Facebook than
Yeah.
probably I've
No
ever done
question.
for LinkedIn. And I'm not telling people don't do LinkedIn. I'm
Yeah.
saying don't walk in with preconceived notions.
Yeah.
You know, the all of the tools of HubSpot, and this is another thing, is we're talking about all the components. Let's talk about them. Forms, right? Creating forms, calls to action, live chat on the website, social media management, pay-per-click management, Advertising, digital advertising management. And by the way, there's a lot more coming in the suite as well, because HubSpot is constantly expanding the capabilities of the platform. So it's an omni-channel capability that we have here. That doesn't mean you have to use all 15, all right?
Right.
But don't limit yourself to one or two because you think they're the only things relevant to my industry.
Well, and I think to that point, just as a sort of microcosm example, in HubSpot, if you are using the platform and you set up a campaign and you set up, your forms, your landing pages, your call to action buttons, your social media, whatever, blog posts, all of that can filter down into a quote unquote campaign where you can see at a glance how many people visited the page, how many people completed the form, how many people clicked the buttons, all of
Yes.
that stuff. The reporting function and your visibility into its effectiveness is pretty unparalleled given what you can do in HubSpot. So I think that's a crucial point.
Absolutely. And I'm actually just going to show for everyone's reference. These are just standard created examples of templates of campaigns. And when you look at any one of these campaigns, you can tie in forms, landing pages, emails, workflows, social posts, ads, and more. Like, that's the beauty of it. These are all ready to go. And
Yep.
and again, you're tying it together. So what's hard for clients, I think, often to understand is they'll be like, well, I want to do a lead generation campaign. They'll click the button and they'll say, well, what is all this? I want to send emails and get leads.
They want
Right?
to press the easy button.
That's correct. That's correct. And the point is, the beauty is in doing all these things together. It's in creating that journey. When we talk about the stool with the three legs, the three-legged stools, right? Sales, marketing, service, that customer experience journey, it's a journey. This is a roadmap, and each of these assets is a stop on the journey. So you send an email, someone clicks through, they go to a landing page, they fill out a form, they then get nurtured in a workflow, then they see a social post, then they're reminded of the next component through the ad campaign. It is all of those together that
Yeah.
makes the magic.
Well, and the one thing I would want to underscore with all of this is technology is the enabler. It enables you to do certain things. But if we talk about the customer journey or customer experience, the first word there is customer, right? We're wanting to do things on behalf of the customer. So we've had a very internal focused discussion.
Right.
But if we're keeping the customer and their experience and the journey in the forefront, we're going to create content. We're going to do things that are going to enhance that, but we're going to be able to do it and deliver it and measure it through HubSpot. And
Yes.
HubSpot would be the first people to tell you it's about the experience first and creating value for the customer. That's why our tools exist.
I'm curious if you have off the top of your head, what are some examples, some common examples in your mind of ways that B2B companies could really easily improve their customer experience by embracing the approach that you just described?
Well, I mean, truthfully, I think one of the best ways would be for sales, marketing, and support to get together and say, how do we align ourselves to be working toward the benefit of our customers? And the funny thing is, a customer relationship, our goal is to get a customer, right?
And keep them.
And keep them. And that's the big thing, right? But retention starts before you even get the customer.
Yes.
So we have this acquisition mindset, but what we should really have is the retention mindset before we acquire them, so that we're worried about keeping them once we've taken them through the whole thing and they've become a customer, they're loyal, blah, blah, blah. But I think, treating B2B a little bit differently, because I do think we look at it differently than B2C. And it's like, look, at the end of the day, we're all consumers, whether we work for a $100 million B2B company or whether we're buying a razor on Amazon.
It's funny. I just bought a new electric razor on Amazon earlier today. You read my mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, human beings are human beings. And so we still want to, appeal and apply to that common denominator of being a human being. And to your point, I've had a client recently that was a product launch in the consumer space. And we're going to be doing stuff on LinkedIn, because if you look at the back way around, the primary target market and the secondary target market are more not likely. They are on LinkedIn.
Right.
Sure, they're not looking for this consumer product, but that doesn't mean we can't get in front of them
That's right.
while they're there.
And in fact, to some extent, there's enormous benefit in being where your competition isn't, but still in
Yeah,
front of your customer.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
that understanding that thinking, I've thought about how many times over my career I've facilitated, marketing working groups, or marketing sales, or any of those components, but we'll just focus on the marketing for the moment. And when I suggest we need to do a focus group of customers or a series of those or surveys, let's get customer input, let's interview them. No, we know what we need. We're good. We know what our customers want. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't. And I know that for myself, because the whole reason you're here, Terry, right? Going back to how we started this conversation almost an hour ago, the whole reason Terry is a part of the Wendt Partners team is because a customer hit us on the head and said, I don't think you're listening to me.
Yeah.
Well, we thought you needed training on how to use the software. No. Listen to me. And
Yeah.
we weren't. Like, they
Right.
had to, and now we got the message. They need this kind of help. And I can tell you that has been true time and time and again. We've changed our business more because of customer feedback
Yeah.
than we have because of any insight that's sitting in my brain.
Well, I think that brings up, you asked, what are ways that business to business companies, or really any companies, can improve, what they're doing for the customer and the customer experience. I like to use what I call an inside out approach, right? So everything we've really talked to, we're kind of looking at it from our point of view, the
Right.
customer, the company,
The
what's going to help the
company, right.
company, what's going to help the employees, blah, 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 blah. But it's really about the customer. So if you're really looking from the outside in and going, okay, as a customer, what do you want to see? What's going to benefit you? And you apply that to the way you're doing business with your customers and prospects.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And ask them, because assumption, we all assume, and you know what they say about the word assume, it makes
Oh
an
my
ass out of
God.
you and me, mostly me. Right.
We're
And then,
having parallel conversations and thoughts here, because, and sorry, I didn't mean to step on you
no,
there, but
you didn't step on it at all. I was just
I was
joking about
just in
what
a
an ass
meeting the
I've
other
been.
day, and there's all of this assumption and sort of going, well, what about this? What about this? And it's like, you know what the fastest path is to the right answer? Go directly to the source and ask them.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
I mean,
And so tying this back to like those three elements of the journey, you said start with retention in mind. So one of the in HubSpot, the way we find out if customers are happy, one of the tools that we can use is customer satisfaction and net promoter score surveys,
yep,
which of course are in Service Hub. But the
sure.
irony about that is marketing needs that information, sales, service needs that information, of course, but they're only one stakeholder. They just happen to own the function,
Yeah.
right? Those other departments need that input. All the, the classic scenario is the company makes an assumption. We go ask the customers, and they're like, that's not really, no, actually, there are other companies that are much better at that thing. There may be other things that this company is good at, but that ain't one of them. And I hear that all the time. So we have to ask the customer. And again, that gets us crossing borders between sales, marketing, and service.
Well, and I know we're at time, but
Yep,
one final thought on that, right?
absolutely.
Sales has historically always said, they own the customer.
Right,
That's not the case. The company owns the customer.
right.
And there are, multiple facets or positions that touch the customer, and that, sales, marketing, and support all own the customer.
Absolutely. And I will end with this thought. That is why HubSpot is a unified platform.
That's
The
right.
challenge is to create a unified culture and
Yes.
then implement a unified strategy that culture can make possible. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope you've had as much fun with this conversation as I have. Terry, thank you so much for bringing enormous insights and great ideas and great
Thank you.
stories to the discussion today.
Anytime. I appreciate it.
And if anybody here wants to further explore either HubSpot or effective strategy to break down barriers and drive business growth, please reach out to me, Doug at wendtpartners.com, or reach out to Terry at wendtpartners.com. We look forward to helping you on your B2B growth journey in the future. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.